Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show right here on Clemson at the voice of college football. Thank you so much for joining me. I am, as always, your host, Tiger Paul Craven. We got a jam-packed show for you guys tonight. Going to talk a little House versus NCAA settlement. We're going to talk a recruiting update, lots going on in the recruiting trail for Clemson and a lot of teams around college football. So all of that and more coming up in tonight's episode. But if you are not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. We're getting closer and closer to that 6,000 subscriber goal. So your help with that would be greatly appreciated. Hit that like button. Really helps us out on these live videos. Share this video with all of your friends, family, anybody out there that likes to consume college football content. Share the video with them and invite them to subscribe to our channel. And then last but certainly not least, we got two ways to support the channel. If you like what me and Jordan do here on the All In Show and the content that you see on Clemson at the voice of college football, consider becoming a channel member and supporting the show in that way. And your support there would be greatly appreciated. We're gonna start coming out as the season comes around. We're going to start doing member-only exclusive content for those that support the channel in that way. And then last but certainly not least, we got the Super Chat feature. If you would like to ensure that your comment and or question is read and responded to during this live show, hit that Super Chat feature, and that will ensure that that happens. And with all of that said, and without further ado, I'm going to bring on my co-host, Jordan Bowman. Jordan, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Good, man. Back on the phone again. Laptop issues continue to haunt me when it comes to StreamYard, but we're gonna make this one work again, and we'll be back to our normal setup soon. But other than that, I'm doing good, brother.
Yeah, man. It's been a busy week. Sorry, we're starting a little bit late tonight. That is my fault. I'm getting home a little late. Just been a crazy week. A lot of stuff going on here. But you guys are not interested in that. You guys are interested in the college football content that we are going to cover on this show tonight. But before we get into the show tonight, before we get into the college football content, I don't want to waste a lot of time at the beginning of the show because we're getting started late. So that's going to limit the amount of questions and comments we can get to at the end. So quick shout out to the comment section, and then we'll go ahead and dive into the show, Jordan. Billy Cotton is first in here tonight. Thank you so much for getting in here and commenting in the live stream. Appreciate your support and stopping by. Christian is in here. David, our channel member, our very first channel member, our cornerstone channel member, if you will. Thank you for stopping by. Appreciate your support, and it does not go unnoticed. John Sarian is in here, one of our great moderators. Wet Sox. Let's see. Joe Long is in here. Arthur Moss is in here. If I missed you, I did not mean to. Get your comments, get your questions in throughout the live show. We'll try to star some of them as we go through our planned content tonight. And at the end of the show, we will get to your comments. We'll get to your questions, and we'll try to answer as many as we can before we get out of here tonight. But Jordan, it has been a busy week, I think, for both of us. But it's great to be here tonight on the All In Show with you and to chop it up a little bit about Clemson football, college football, and all the various changes that we are going through right now. But before we get into that, Jordan, I wanted to hit on a recruiting update tonight. Obviously, there is a lot going on the recruiting trail, not only for the Clemson Tigers, but all the teams out there in college football. It's in the heat of recruitment season. It's in the heat of official visit weekends, and everybody's locking in recruits here and there. And we did a show last week, Jordan, and we didn't get to talk about one of our biggest commits because he didn't commit until after we were done with the show, and we didn't get a chance to talk to him, and that is Carter Scruggs, offensive lineman, adding to a already massive haul from our very own Matt Luke, offensive line coach for the Clemson Tigers. And just give us a little rundown on Carter Scruggs and what this commitment means for the Tigers. I think we are completely done now at offensive line. We're not going to take any further commitments at offensive line, but this is quite a haul that Matt Luke has put together. And just give us some notes and some highlights from Carter Scruggs and what Clemson fans could be expecting from landing a recruit such as him.
Yeah, I mean, Carter Scruggs is a guy that, Clemson has been, really in on for quite some time. From Loudoun County, Virginia, Clemson has done a really good job as of late in Virginia in recent cycles. And this is just another example. Carter Scruggs is a guy that I think could play tackle, but I think he's definitely projects more to play on the inside. And he's just been dominating the camp circuit as of late. His stock has continued to rise. He's now a top 200 player, or like top 150 player, I should say. It just adds to another piece to what's arguably the best offensive line class in the country right now. If you look at just the quality and the quantity of players that Clemson has. I mean, maybe USC might have an argument, but beyond that, I mean, I don't see another program in the country that has as impressive of a offensive line haul as Clemson does right now. And Carter Scruggs is, he wanted to jump in the boat. There was one spot left, and that was, that was the kind of the sign there. And he kind of had always felt like Clemson was going to be the choice, and he said, why keep taking visits and all that? Let me go ahead and secure my spot. So, really, really excited for this group and what their potential is. And I think the coolest thing about what this class has been is that you've basically landed everybody that you prioritized. I mean, when you think of the guys that you've landed, the Adam Guthries, the Grant Wises, of course, Carter Scruggs, Chance Barkley, like these are guys that Clemson thought really highly of, and they were their first choices on the board, and they went and got them. That hasn't always been the case with Clemson and offensive line recruiting. You've had your star-studded guys, here and there, but a Blake Miller, Tristan Lay was a 5-star coming out, but those were few and far between. And even the highly rated guys that you were going after, you were missing on. You were having to go deeper into your board to fill out your class. But that's not the case this time. You had to tell a kid like Cannon Pickett, who just committed to Miami the other day, I believe yesterday. He couldn't commit to you because you
right.
took. Yeah, I mean, you filled up and you got the guys that you wanted. And I like Cannon Pickett. Another guy, Fletcher Turk is a guy that we've talked about it a little bit over the past couple of weeks. Clemson really liked him. Dalton Toothman, like you had some really high caliber players, Akene Ogboko, like that were on campus for that official visit weekend. That you filled up and you got the guys that you wanted. So that's. Right. I think that's the most incredible thing about what Matt Luke has meant for this offensive line and their recruiting efforts.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of saw him kind of widen the net at one point in time in the recruiting process, and come to find out he didn't need to, right? And you mentioned a lot of those guys that Clemson would have been lucky to have commit to, become Tigers, and We just kind of hit on all the guys that we prioritized at the front of the class, and that's something that I don't know if is getting a lot of talk out there, is getting a lot of respect out there, but it's not been the norm at Clemson. This is a new version of recruiting level for the offensive line position at Clemson University. This has long been something that me and you have talked about, not only on the air, but off the air, about how we hoped that Clemson offensive line would develop into. And Matt Luke has come on board. And in his first 2 years, he has absolutely knocked it out of the park, not only with developing the players that are on the roster, but you talk about the guys that he's recruiting, the guys that he's getting on campus. Clemson would not have gotten on campus before Matt Luke was the offensive line coach here. And I think that's important to realize. And, we talked about it last week, but, the two highest rated recruits in our class currently, a top 5 class currently, mind you, are 2 offensive linemen. And that's not something that Clemson has been able to say in the Dabo Swinney era. It's been the one position group that I think can be criticized with not being recruited at a high enough level, and that clearly has changed for the better for the Clemson Tigers. And I cannot wait to see the offensive lines that Matt Luke is going to produce as the Clemson offensive line coach. I hope we can keep him forever. I don't know if we'll be able to, but we're going to enjoy the ride while he's here, because this is uncommon recruiting for Clemson at the offensive line position. So, my sentiment out there to Clemson fans is enjoy it while it lasts, because we may not have Matt Luke forever, but you better enjoy it while it lasts, because this is elite level offensive line recruiting and development.
Yeah, 100%. And it's kind of trickled into kind of how Clemson has gone about doing things at other positions. I'm going to talk about the safety position in a little bit, but what you've done at that position already is almost as impressive. And you already have guys like Polo Anderson and Caden Gebhardt in the boat, and you're still very much in it for a few more highly rated guys, Joey O'Brien, Blake Stewart, like. You're starting to see them expand the board and go after the higher caliber guys at positions that Clemson traditionally has not recruited the highest. I mean, honestly, the 2 positions that you could probably say over the Dabo Swinney tenure that they have not recruited the best at in terms of like star talent is offensive line and safety. And I think you've had better success at safety, because I think you've had some good takes, good development there. But still, like, the guys that you're seeing win national championships, the programs that are winning national championships, they are able to land high caliber safety prospects, and I think that it's a luxury to have. You're not getting like a Caleb Downs, but getting a top 100 guy every once in a while is pretty nice. I mean, and you've done that, and you saw what Andrew Makuba was, for Texas after he left. I mean. You don't get many guys like that.
Right.
So, you got to Clemson has made a much better effort, I think. And I think they're, from an NIL standpoint, they are in a much better position to make that a more attractive part of their recruiting efforts too. So.
Yeah. I think you make a good point there. It's, Clemson has righted some of the wrongs that contributed to the mass amount of decommits that we saw last cycle, and that was, what I hope to be an anomaly for a Clemson class. I think it was an anomaly, and I think that will prove out as time goes on, because I think they've corrected some of that stuff when you talk about the NIL and the collectives and how they approach new age recruiting, if you will. Like, this is a completely different era of college football, and Clemson. They went through a bit of a rough patch, and that was very evident in last year's recruiting cycle about not being able to hold on to some of the top recruits in their class. We saw 6 to 7 guys decommit, and they were high-level guys, and it hurt last recruiting cycle, but they have rebounded nicely. You can see that Dabo Swinney stressed to the staff, especially this recruiting cycle, how important it was. The NIL collectives got on board. Graham Neff, the athletic director, kind of got on board with allowing points and things like that. The same points that you would get for recruiting or for contributing to IPTAY, you would get for contributing to, the NIL collective as well. So, I think they got kind of a bit more of a grasp at it, at all levels of Clemson athletics right now when it comes to football, recruiting, the NIL space, and all of that stuff. So let's go ahead and turn the page. We talked about Carter Scruggs and how exciting it is to have him on board and the recruiting class that Matt Luke has brought on the offensive line. But that's that's not all the exciting news that's going on with Clemson football and recruiting. We got a lot of iron still in the fire, Jordan. We got a lot of players, a lot of big name guys that are still out there on the board that Clemson is in really good position with. So tell us what's going on with recruiting. We got 18 recruits in this recruiting class so far. It's a top 5 class right now as it sits. Will it finish a top 5 class? Probably not. But we got a lot of great players. Tell us about the guys that are uncommitted that Clemson is still in a really good position with, and position groups that we are still in the hunt for, a couple more commits.
Yeah, you're still waiting on movement on the defensive front, defensive line, defensive end, linebacker. Starting with the defensive line, you have guys and irons in the fire like Bryce Perry White and Dre Quinn. Those are the priorities. Bryce Perry White is a guy that some view as a defensive end, a lot of others view as a defensive tackle. Clemson is kind of pitching both ways to him. You can come here and play either or, and so with the defensive end numbers in particular, they would be willing to consider Bryce Perry White a take at defensive end. And he's continued to take his visits. I've talked about it before. He has the family connections to Clemson. He's the cousin of Armand Mason, and he's also Grady Jarrett is also his uncle, I believe. So you have that. You have the familial connections to Clemson. He's been to Clemson more than any other school. Right now he's continuing to take his official visits, but Clemson, from what I understand, still feels really good about where they stand with him. And I think it's one of those things where you just gotta hold the course, hold steady, and you should be the pick at the end. But crazier things have happened, and the programs he is visiting certainly have their ways of being persuasive. He was just at Miami this past weekend. From what I understand, he had a really nice time. And Miami, is pushing really hard for him. He is a priority for them. So something to watch. I think he'll be at Texas A&M this coming weekend. So this is you got to continue to remind him of why Clemson is the pick. Everything that he would have going for him if he were to pick Clemson, all the connections that are already there, and all of that. And then with Dre Quinn, I think he got a prediction today on 24/7 Sports for Clemson. Always a good sign. But he's also going to continue to take his visits. But I think if you're able to land both of these guys, I mean, obviously the complexion of the defensive line class looks a lot different than even a month ago. I mean, you got a guy like Cameron Cody who we all really like, but one guy does not make a defensive line class. But you transform that with a 5-star talent like Bryce Perry White, a top 100 player like Dre Quinn, and then all of a sudden, you have a pretty formidable defensive line class already, even if it's not like the quantity that you've seen in previous cycles. So continuing to keep an eye on them. I already mentioned safety. Joey O'Brien and Blake Stewart are guys that Clemson is still pushing hard for. I don't think they would tell either one of them no if they both wanted to commit. So if you do take 4 safeties, I think that's something Clemson would be willing to do. Joey O'Brien is just coming off his visit to Oregon. From what I understand, had a really good time there. But I kind of see this as a Clemson. It's not really clear right now, but I see it as a Clemson, Notre Dame, Penn State race. Somebody has the lead. Who knows? I don't know. Joey seems to be a kid that's kind of impressionable. So he's going to say really, really good things and be really, really high on whoever he just recently visited. But I do think Clemson is legitimately in contention and could land his commitment. But I do think that, Penn State and Notre Dame also have very, very strong chances as well. And, he visits Notre Dame last and pushed that official visit up from, I believe it was originally scheduled for June 20th, but then that was also the day he announced his commitment. So they moved it up to June 13th to make sure that he got in and saw Notre Dame. So I don't think that's insignificant either. With Blake Stewart, Miami has been the team that has been on him the longest and the team that's been the perceived favorite. But over that official visit weekend did move the needle for him at Clemson. So, it's one of those things where I think you just got to see what happens. I think Blake I think you've certainly entered that top tier contender discussion for him as well. So if you can land, landing one of them would be great, but landing both, that's now we're talking, best safety class in the country. So that's something to consider as well. And then, of course, the biggest name left on the board, linebacker Tyler Atkinson, putting all your chips in on him. You've dedicated a ton of resources, recruiting efforts into him. He's continuing to take his visits. He was also at Oregon with Joey O'Brien. I don't think that's insignificant in this. It's nice to have two guys, that were there for that official visit weekend, and continuing to build that relationship. And maybe they were talking. Maybe when they were at Oregon, they were talking about Clemson too. So that's not the worst thing in the world. He just announced today that he's going to be in Georgia, at Georgia this weekend. Certainly the program that I think everybody, if you're a Clemson fan, you're keeping the closest eye on, because that's the guy that you're going to continue to worry about, the program that you're going to continue to worry about when it comes to those Georgia recruits, obviously. So we'll see how that goes. It was delusional if anybody thought that, after the official visit weekend, Tyler Atkinson was going to shut down his recruitment and commit and jump in the boat. That's not how that's not how I viewed his recruitment. But I do still think Clemson will be in contention when it's all said and done. So just got to keep chipping away.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Look, lots of iron still in the fire for Clemson football. Lots of recruiting left to do. And again, all these guys that we have verbal commitments for have not signed. So that's always important to remember, especially in lieu of what happened last cycle, late in the cycle, with 6 to 7 guys decommitting. I do not anticipate that happening this cycle, but again, it's always a possibility. You're never guaranteed to keep all of your verbal commitments, but Clemson is doing a very good job. Still got a lot of irons in the fire, and recruiting has been, and I think will continue to look up and up as the summer continues and we get into fall and players start getting on campus for games and stuff like that. I think the momentum will continue to carry for Clemson. It seems that there is a renewed focus on recruiting, and that comes from the athletic director all the way down to the coaches. So exciting times for the Clemson Tigers, exciting times for recruiting, still inside the top 5 of recruiting. Again, I think we will ultimately end up outside of the top 5, probably inside the top 10 at this point. But again, stars ratings are what they are. I'm excited about every single one of these guys that Clemson has verbal commitments from, and the guys that I think we will get verbal commitments from. So we'll continue to monitor it. We'll continue to update you guys as new things come out, and we'll go ahead and leave recruiting there.
Yep.
All right. If you guys did not know, the Voice of College Football has an official webpage, a one-stop shop for all things Voice of College Football, our schedule's up there. All of our articles are up there. Various writers contribute to the site. You got forums that you can go and deep dive into your team and other teams and see what other people are saying about your teams. You can read about the hosts, the writers, and again, all of the show schedules are on there. All the updated schedules are on there. So if you ever have a question on when and where a show is going to be under the Voice of College Football umbrella, this is your one-stop shop webpage. Go on there, make an account. You will not regret it. Go read it. Go interact with the site. Let us know what you think. Let us know what improvements you want to see. And that would be greatly appreciated, guys. It's your one-stop shop for all things Voice of College Football. All right, guys, we got 35 people in the live chat right now. Thank you guys so much for being here. I know we started a little bit late tonight, but I appreciate everybody sticking around and going through that with us. We still got one more subject to get to tonight as far as the planned portion of the show, and then I promise we're going to turn it over to the live chat. We're going to get to your comments. We're going to get to your questions. We're going to interact with you before we get out of here tonight, but we got one more topic. So hit that like, hit that subscribe, get us as close to that 35 number as possible, and that would be greatly appreciated. Jordan, I'm sure everybody knows at this point that the House settlement has arrived last Friday, 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The House settlement dropped. The judge signed the settlement. We have the parameters of what will be the future of college football, at least for now. And there's a lot of different layers to the House versus NCAA settlement. There's a lot of different layers as far as NIL goes, revenue sharing goes, roster limits go, grandfathered in players as far as walk-ons and stuff. There's multi-layers to this. But let's break it down in a couple different ways tonight, Jordan. We're going to talk about it mainly from a Clemson standpoint, but obviously from an overall holistic college football standpoint as well. When you go through and you read some of the stuff that's coming out of the House settlement, it's exciting. If you're kind of a purist, if you're kind of an OG college football fan, if you will, it looks like that it's going to get some of the nonsense that has driven us crazy for the past, 2 to 4 years at this point about college football, with NIL being dropped in everybody's lap, and there's no guidelines, there's no guardrails, there's no any enforcement on NIL. It essentially became not NIL, and it became pay for play. So just rich boosters were just throwing millions of dollars at high school athletes and other college athletes via the transfer portal to come play for their alma mater, right? That's essentially what NIL became in the wild, wild west version of college football that we've been in for quite some time now. One of the great things that is written into the House settlement is some guardrails when it comes to NIL. And this is kind of where I want to start, Jordan, is the NIL situation, because I feel like this has been one of the major issues plaguing college football in conjunction with the endless transfer portal team hopping cycle that we are in. So essentially, if you read the House versus NCAA settlement, there will be a third-party committee that has to vet every single NIL deal that is above $600. The individual institutions, will have to report their NIL dealings with that particular player or that. And what will happen is they will vet it with not necessarily fair market value, because it's really hard to put a fair market value on marketing deals, right? Because traditionally a marketing deal, right, Jordan, if I'm coming to you and I'm saying I'm going to give you a marketing deal and I have X company and I'm going to pay you to be the face of X company, right? You're essentially worth whatever I say you're worth, right? Whatever I'm willing to pay you to star in my commercials or make X amount of social media posts or whatever. But they're going to scrub these deals to see if they are within the parameters of other deals that are similar to them, if that makes sense to everybody. So not necessarily fair market value, because that's kind of a weird thing, and that gets into legalities and stuff like that. But Jordan, let's talk about this NIL thing specifically with the House settlement. Do you think that there will be any real parameters that are going to be able to be enforced with this new committee, with this new governing body, if you will, that will be vetting these NIL deals? How long do you think it's going to be before we see the first lawsuit because they deny a deal and tell a player that that's not a reasonable business practice when it comes to a marketing deal?
I don't think it's going to take long, to be honest with you. I mean, when you think about who is involved with all of this, it's not just people that have college football with their best interest in heart. There are lawyers, there's politics involved. I definitely think there's going to be some bad actors that are going to be willing to, jump on the first opportunity, the first time that somebody's NIL deal is voided or denied, jump all over that, drop a lawsuit on the school, and because I do think there are a lot of bad actors, and I think that's the thing that I'm worried about. You mentioned the fair market value stuff too. I mean, obviously that's, as you mentioned, that's very subjective, and that's going to vary from place to place, because say you take a school like, I don't know, like a UCLA or something.
Yeah.
They're in Los Angeles, but they're like at best like the numbers wise, they can't be a top 5, top 10 most watched brand in that state. Like, I mean, they're definitely, California's definitely much more a professional sports state. And then you've got, you've got USC, who absolutely in the same city that absolutely dwarfs UCLA in terms of viewership and all the metrics that you think of. So like, they're not even they wouldn't even be the most popular college in that large city. So, what for like a player that's getting, I don't know, Nico Iamaleava just transferred there, and say he's getting what was it, the 5 million that he was asking for, whatever it was, 4.5 million. Like, is that really fair market value? You considering like what, where he is, and from a geographical standpoint, and what, from a viewership standpoint, what he would bring. I mean, maybe I don't know. So those are the things that you're going to have to consider as well. And like I said, there's going to be, all it takes is one time. You're going to see somebody that's trying, some lawyer, some firm that's trying to get attention, because that's what a lot of it is like, hey, I want to get noticed in the federal courts, and I want to bring a case to to the federal courts, and I don't really care about the well-being of college football. I don't watch it. I don't care about it, but it involves something that's going to make me money and get me attention. So I'm gonna be all over it. So that's the thing. That's the biggest thing for me, is like, how do you go about enforcing these things, without legal challenge? I don't think you can.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing for me, Jordan, and I think every college football fan that has closely paid attention to what has gone on the last, let's say, 3 to 4, maybe 5 years, right, in college football, and specifically, the University of Tennessee, right? If you look at the University of Tennessee, they kind of are the catalyst for where we are with NIL, right? It's the NCAA was looking into them with the the Nico recruitment and what they were doing with NIL there. And then the state of Tennessee sues the NCAA. They win, obviously. It's all these antitrust lawsuits that are being levied against the NCAA. They lost every single one of them. So they lost all their teeth. They lost all their ability to enforce any rules. So what they did was throw their hands up and not enforce any rules. And, my question with this House settlement is how long before another university, maybe it's Tennessee again, levies another lawsuit against the new governing body, if you will, this third party agency that's supposed to vet these NIL deals and make sure they're legitimate and make sure that they are a fair business practice and that they are a fair market value or whatever you want to call it. I don't think it will be too long before that rears its ugly head in college football yet again. So while the House settlement, I think, brings some clarity to college football right now and probably brings a bit more parameters to the game of college football right now, it certainly does not solve all the problems in college football. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the good things that the House settlement does for college football, right? Obviously, there's revenue sharing now. Revenue sharing, in my opinion, has been a long awaited thing in college football. I think it should have been a thing long ago. And I think, honestly, if the NCAA would have gave a little bit more ground, 5-6 years ago, we would not be sitting in the situation that we are in currently as college football fans, right? But unfortunately, that did not happen, right? But now we are to a point where, the House settlement has been agreed upon. The judge signed it. There is a $2.8 billion settlement between athletes from now all the way back to, I think, 2016 that will receive payments for revenue that they should have gotten, right? That's great. I'm totally on board with that. I think that's awesome, right? One of the other great things that come is the $20.5 million per institution that they are allowed to now revenue share with their athletes. And it's up to each individual institution how they divvy that up between football, basketball, baseball, softball, whatever various sports that they have on campus, right? They can divvy that up in whatever way they will. Another thing that came out of the House versus NCAA settlement is rosters and what your roster is going to have to look like. Your roster is going to have to go down to 105 players. That's what it's going to have to go down to. Now, there are grandfathered in players currently, your walk-ons, your players like that are currently on the roster. You do not have to kick them off. But between now and like a 3-year span, rosters are going to go from, probably 120, 130 is what most college football rosters look like with the scout team and all that, down to 105. So coaches are going to have to get creative, right, about how they construct their rosters, how they do practice. There's probably going to be tweaks to how they run scout team, how they do various things in practice that they no longer have the bodies for. So your thoughts on kind of those aspects of the House versus NCAA settlement and how that's going to affect college football going forward?
Yeah, it's like you mentioned, it was nice to see them, kind of grandfather in, something the walk-ons that, so that way you're not just flat out cutting people,
just cutting dudes on July 1st and being like, hey, sorry, you didn't make the 105.
Yeah. So, that's good. I mean, you get some clarity. It's going to be, a lot more streamlined and simple as far as, I guess, at least roster management, numbers wise, and I think that's probably going to take a couple of years to truly sort out. But, at least you have some answers on how things are going to go in the immediate, because that was very much up in the air, and people it's not. We're not just talking about numbers here. I mean, we're talking about actual human being students, with, that are trying to get education and live
Right.
their lives that don't know whether or not they're going to be they're going to be able to play football, or
Exactly.
do they need to transfer? Do they need to try and find an
Mhm.
opportunity somewhere else, or are they just going to be done with football?
Right.
So now, at least there's some answers there, and that way you're not, you know, you know, as an institution, you're not put in a terrible spot where you have to, um, basically screw over these kids that are hardworking parts of your program, and that you need, quite frankly.
Mhm.
So yeah, and from a Clemson standpoint, I'm very interested to see how Dabo navigates it, because I know how he feels about walk-ons, and how he loves
Absolutely.
the walk-on program here, and how much he values them. So I wonder, like, what is he going to stay? Is he going to personally continue to take 85 schollies, and maybe leave 20 roster spots for walk-ons? Is he going to, you're gonna see some schools potentially just completely do away with walk-ons, but I don't see Dabo doing that. So I'm
He
interested to
will
see
not.
kind of how
He will
Clemson
not.
does.
Yeah, I'm almost certain Dabo Swinney will not do away completely with walk-ons, and when you think about it, you're talking about 105 people basically being on scholarship, right? That's a weird place to navigate, because usually teams are used to 85 scholarship athletes, right? You're going to 105, and that sounds great, but you're losing a lot of those walk-on pieces, and then you're talking about roster turnover a lot more when you're talking about 105 scholarship people versus 85 scholarship football players, right? Like, it becomes a far more uphill feat to retain your roster when you have that many more people under scholarship, right? That expect to play. They expect to have an avenue to playing time and to, all these things, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how not only Dabo, but other coaches throughout, college football kind of navigate this new 105 roster, and how much of them still keep walk-ons, how much of them just kind of go to 105 just scholarship guys, period. It's going to be really interesting to see how teams divvy it up. It's also going to be really interesting. I think one of the points to mention is the $20.5 million in revenue sharing. That's across all sports. So I know us here as college football fans, we're talking about it from a sheer football standpoint, right? And make no mistake about it, almost every university in the country, most of the money will go to college football, right? It will go to the football team, absolutely. But how do those universities divvy it up, right? How is Clemson going to divvy up that $20.5 million? What percentage is going to go to football? What percentage is going to go to basketball, baseball, so on and so forth, with the 21 sports that Clemson has currently, as a part of their athletic department, right? And then, when you think about this, one of the other things to bring up, Jordan, is Title IX. Where does Title IX play into all of this? Because again, when you talk about lawsuits, and we talked earlier about NIL, and who's going to be the first one to levy a lawsuit against this new committee, or this new governing body, if you will. Who's going to be the first student body or university or whatever entity to levy a lawsuit based on Title IX and the divvying up of this $20.5 million?
Yeah, that's another massive part of this equation, and it's something that the House settlement in generally kind of skirted around. During the proceedings, the judge that was overseeing, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. She was very, very reluctant. She said, I'm not really even going to touch that right now.
If
So
I was her, I wouldn't either.
yeah, I don't blame her, because it's a very that's a very touchy, fine line you have to walk, with with how you go about, talking about it. So that's the thing, and because this revenue sharing money is I believe it's considered academic money, or scholarship money is considered academic money. So when you think about it from that standpoint, you can use your revenue sharing to fund scholarships and stuff like that. Those things are also that also kind of muddies the water a little bit in terms of how you go about doing things. Now, I think there are ways for schools to probably be, kind of skirt around some of the guardrails with how they report the spending. There's some financial, tricks and things you can do, underhanded things that you could probably do to keep some things off the books, or report it in a way that it doesn't raise flags in terms of like Title IX and stuff like that. But that's going to be a burning question at a lot of places, is okay, how do we go about divvying this up in a way where we're not we're not perceived as favoring sports, based
Right.
on, especially based on gender. So, that's going
Yeah,
to be something that
that's
I
a
think.
big one. And talking about all of this stuff, it's as many questions, or I guess as many answers as this house settlement gives, it begs a whole bunch more questions, right? Like, I think one of the things that college football fans, especially people that follows the sport as closely as we do, Jordan, and kind of are in tune with things that have happened within the sport, and pay attention to the nuances of what happens in the sport, we can see the friction points of what is going to happen with this house settlement, right? The enforcement of the private equity, or the private business NIL portion of this. That's going to be really hard to enforce, right? Uh, the second that a university or an individual player brings a lawsuit, I think they lose immediately, right? And that's one of the unfortunate things that I kind of foresee. I also foresee a Title IX lawsuit when it comes to this, because I think most universities are going to lean heavy into football. I think Clemson's going to be one of those universities that lean extremely heavy into football, because that's the bread and butter of Clemson, right? That's where the revenue comes from. Yeah, maybe a little bit of men's basketball, but I mean, 95% of the revenue in the athletic department at Clemson comes from the football team. And rightfully so, the football team's going to be like, well, then we should get 90 to 95% of the revenue sharing, right? Like, so I foresee those things happening. Another thing that you foresee happening is just kind of, are we going to get to a point in college? Like, have we gotten to a point in college athletics where it's been professionalized to a point where we are going to start cutting non-revenue generating sports, right? And I think that's a real conversation that universities are going to start having within their athletic department. And that's sad to me, because I don't want to see non-revenue generating sports, your Olympic sports, your whatever sport you want to name, gymnastics, softball, lacrosse, like whatever sport you want to name that is revenue generating. I don't want to see those go away. But we may get to a point within college athletics, because of the professionalism of it, that universities may have to cut sports, and that's unfortunate. And that's not what I want to see happen. So, it's as exciting as it is to get guardrails around the sport of college football, and I think the House versus NCAA does some of that. It certainly does not solve even a fraction of the problems that are within college athletics right now. And I don't know the answer to everything. Honestly, maybe outside of college athletes becoming employees and unionizing and collectively bargaining, I don't know that we solve all of these issues, because without a collective bargaining, there's going to be antitrust law after antitrust law after antitrust law, and it's going to be a cycle of all of this. So, I don't know where we go in college football at this point or college athletics as a whole. It's a complicated time. We're getting some answers now with the House settlement, and that's great. But again, me personally, I think it raises a lot more questions than really gives true answers of where we're going when it comes to college athletics.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. It's answered some questions. It's given clarity on some things, but it's also opened the can of worms and opened the door for a million other things that we just have no idea how all of that is going to play out. And at this point, we'll address it when we get to it, I guess. I mean, that's kind of the mentality. We'll plug this hole here, and even if a couple more holes in the boat start leaking, we'll at least have answered this or taken care of this one. So, that's kind
always
of been
reactionary. It's never forward thinking. It's never seeing all the avenues that are going to come and having an answer for everything. It's just we make this decision and then we react, and then we make this decision and then we react. It's quite frustrating. We need a governing body in college athletics that actually has teeth, that actually can lay out guidelines and rules. And I don't know if we ever get there outside of athletes becoming employees and unionizing and collectively bargaining. That may be the only way. I don't know. Again, there's people out there a lot smarter than me in college athletics that I'm sure have other perspectives, but that's just kind of where I'm at. I am excited about the House versus NCAA settlement, but there's still a lot of questions. There's still a lot of problems within the sport of college football and then college athletics as a whole. And we are far from figuring out where we are going to be in the modern age of college athletics.
Couldn't have said it better.
All right, we'll go ahead and leave that there. We'll be right back after a message from our very own Mark Rogers.
You can make a difference here at the Voice of College Football. Use the Amazon link. Financially contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Same shopping experience. It's easy. Go to any video on any channel. Go to the description section and grab the link right next to the capital letters that say Amazon. Use that link, and Amazon will instantaneously convert to your account, settings, history, everything intact, just like whatever link you use right now. No difference. Pay no attention to the product that you see right there. Just go search what you want. Don't forget the Amazon link. Thank you for your support. Sincerely, the Voice of College Football.
All right. You guys heard Mark there. Go check out the Amazon link. Use it. Anytime you purchase anything on Amazon, it helps the channel out. It helps the overall umbrella of the Voice of College Football and the Clemson channel as well. Also, we are trying to get as much buy-in with our social media pages as possible. If you guys did not know, we have an Instagram page. Go check it out over on Instagram, the Voice of College Football over on Instagram. You see it right here on your screen. College football discussion, debate, and analysis. Go check it out. The VOCFB over on Instagram. Give us a follow, and that would be greatly appreciated. And then we also have a Twitter page. We have an X page, the Voice of College Football Network over on Twitter. It's where all of our schedules posted, various college football content is posted over there. The Voice of College Football, the best debate, discussion, and analysis with no offseason. Go check us out over on X. Give us a follow over there as well. And you can stay up to date on all things Voice of College Football and our schedule update for all of our shows. So thank you guys for that. And then last but certainly not least, before we get into your comments and questions tonight, We got 27 people in the live chat. Please go ahead and hit that like button for me. And if you've made it this far into the show, you might as well subscribe. Me and Jordan do an all-in show right here every Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, chopping it up about Clemson football, college football, and all things in between. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. And with that said, and without further ado, we're going to get into the comment section and see what you guys are talking about. I started a couple from earlier. Continue to get your comments in, and we will chop it up with you guys for a little bit, and then we will get out of here for the night. All right, Jordan. First question is from John Sarian. Are we going back to a Power 5 with the Pac trying to recover and become a participant again? Maybe more like G6 to me.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of tend towards the latter. I mean, with the Pac-12 trying to make a revival. I mean, the additions that they've made. I mean, it's great that they're, they're continuing to fight for survival, but I don't see those additions. Who are they at? Sacramento State and Fresno State. Like I don't think those additions move the needle as far as where you could consider them a power conference. I still think they would be considerably less talented than even the ACC or the Big 12. I think it's good for the sport that we'll still have another. I guess it doesn't feel right to call them mid majors when we're talking football, but that's what it is without calling them. We don't really have a term for them otherwise, besides the group of five. I think that's a positive. I'm happy that Oregon State and Washington State won't be completely left out to dry in the dust and wallowing in independence, but they certainly have taken a relegation of sorts because of all the conference realignment. And I definitely hate that for them. Shout out to Oregon State's baseball team. They went and took care of business in the super regional, and they're heading back to Omaha. That's a proud program, athletic program, and they've hung around them and Washington State. So I don't think we're heading back to a Power 5, but it's better than having the Pac-12 completely die and having programs kind of wallowing in misery and uncertainty. So
absolutely. It seems Clemson is a serious contender for Devin Fitzgerald. What is Clemson's percentage to land him? From our buddy old David, our channel member. Thanks so much for supporting the channel that way.
Yeah, hard to put a percentage on it. I mean, I think Clemson has done a good job with Devin, but I still think his kind of his recruitment is still kind of taking shape in a lot of ways. I think Clemson did a good job to get off on the right foot. But I think he's a guy that's going to continue to get offers and get more exposure, which is weird to say considering he's the son of a future NFL Hall of Famer. But I'm not sure he's in a rush to jump in the boat. Especially considering the talent that Clemson has at wide receiver right now. But I could be wrong. That's just my personal read on it. But I think Clemson, they got off on the right foot and they put their best foot forward, and they definitely like him a lot. And I think if you take him as a fourth wide receiver, I'd be very pleased if
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's about it.
We're still taking preferred walk-ons. ? Guess I need to read more deeply into the House settlement.
Yeah, the House settlement didn't do away with walk-ons. The walk-on status is still a possible thing. So
right.
the 105 roster limit doesn't mean 105 scholarships need to be allotted. They can be. They can all be scholarship players, but that doesn't necessarily mean that. And as we talked about, I never felt like Clemson and Dabo in particular would be one to do away with the walk-on program. So. And he's Clemson's most recent addition in the transfer portal as a preferred walk-on. He's actually the son of Lonnie Galloway. So I think that's interesting for a number of reasons. Obviously, it doesn't mean much in terms of the roster this year, but it is a very interesting sign when you consider that Lonnie Galloway also has another son that's currently at Providence Day, Griff Galloway, who's a 4-star defensive end. And so, I think that's something to consider as well. So you may have an end on a blue chip defensive end prospect in the 2027 class. And there's actually a couple of guys that you're targeting in that 27 class that have Clemson connections. I mean, we talked about Max Brown, who's already in the boat. Caden Henderson has a lot of Clemson connections. The Jacobs kid is very close with Braden Jacobs. I don't know if they're family or not. I have to do more research on that, but they seem to be very close at the very least. They probably are, but I'll have to actually look into that.
One would assume.
Yeah, what one would assume. So I mean, I think that's interesting for a number of reasons. But yeah, I kind of got off topic a little bit. But yeah, I think the PWO is not going to go away, at least for Clemson and other programs that value their walk-ons. So
yeah, I mean, look, Dabo Swinney is preached from day one that Clemson is a developmental program, and I think he will lean into that as long as possible. I think Clemson will always be a program that has to evaluate well and develop well in order to compete at the highest level. And they're going to continue to do that and lean into it. And if they can figure out a way, they will continue to use the preferred walk-on in this new age of college football. Corey D says, do Clemson fans respect Notre Dame for their place in the history of college football?
I mean, I don't want to speak for the fan base. I mean, I think there's a healthy mix. I mean, there's a number of Clemson fans that don't like Notre Dame at all. I mean, I think you'll find that kind of section in any fan base because Notre Dame is they're a polarizing program in general. I mean, speaking for myself, I certainly have a ton of respect for Notre Dame and what they've meant to college football. And obviously the recent matchups between Clemson and Notre Dame have certainly helped bolster a little bit of a friendly rivalry and mutual respect there as well. So,
yeah,
I would have no problem saying that I respect Notre Dame, but there are some fans that feel differently because of, just it's very Notre Dame is a very like I said, they're a very polarizing program in college football.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain sect, I think, of Clemson fan base that absolutely despises Notre Dame for the way that they've taken advantage of the ACC and the way that they kind of lightly play an ACC schedule to the benefit of them and then continue to be an independent and operate, kind of in an autonomous way. Separate from the ACC, but also get votes in crucial decisions within the ACC. So I understand the frustration from that sect of Clemson fans and that particular group of people of college football fans. But at the same time, I don't blame Notre Dame for any of that because the ACC allows all of that stuff to happen. So I'm of the opinion that any university, whether that be Notre Dame, Clemson, or any other university out there, would do the exact same thing if they were given the opportunity to take advantage of a conference in the way that Notre Dame does the ACC. So I don't really blame them. I do respect them for their history in college football. And frankly, I have quite enjoyed the quote unquote rivalry or the new kind of back and forth that has become the Clemson Florida or Clemson Notre Dame games, starting all the way back the Hurricane game to, the playoff appearances that we've had versus each other, to that butt whipping we got in South Bend, to, bouncing back in a 4-4 season and absolutely winning a game that none of us thought we would. So there's been a lot of great moments within the Clemson Notre Dame games here recently, and I look forward to 12 more years of that. I hope that all 12 of those matchups happen because I've truly enjoyed the back and forth between Clemson and Notre Dame.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, recruiting sounds encouraging. What are y'all's thoughts on Rump's recruiting? He's a great speaker, but hasn't seems to translate into recruiting. Jordan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the jury's still out. Obviously, if you land Dre Quinn, I think that's a big deal. You already have J.R. Hardrick in the boat.
Yep.
But really, it's the defensive side of the ball in general has been slow. You've gotten a couple of corners in the boat, Shavar Young, and Marshall Gibson, and you're still in it for guys like Danny Odom. But I think that it's kind of hard to judge right now. I mean, this is his first full cycle, and I do think there's some things that I wish they went about the approach was a little bit different. But you kind of seen that almost across the board on the defensive side of the ball, other than safety, where you just seen multiple guys casting a wider net. That hasn't been the case for everybody else on the defense. You're only targeting one linebacker essentially right now. Obviously defensive line is really two names of importance right now. I already mentioned corner. You did a good job of getting those guys in the boat because Mike Reed just does what Mike Reed does. But beyond that, it hasn't been the urgency hasn't been there. But I also think it's just when you consider those positions, like defensive end right now in recruiting is one of the premium positions in all of college football. And so you're not seeing guys really across the country. You're not seeing high caliber defensive linemen, defensive ends, jumping in the boat and committing early. So I think that's something to consider too. They're commanding higher dollar figures than anybody else on the defense right now. And so you're going to see guys go and take their visits and see what they can get and what offers they can get. So I think that's something you have to consider too. So I think the jury's out on Rump. I think if you land Dre Quinn, I think that's a very good sign for the future. And it's a good it would be a good feather in his cap. But like I said, the market for defensive ends in particular is so crazy right now. And that means you're just not going to see many guys that are rushing to make decisions because they're going to try and see and run up what kind of money they can get. And that's the reality.
That's the reality of the world of college football that we currently live in. Jordan, I'm pretty sure you feel the same way, but as kind of college football purist, if you will, I don't like it. It's not anything that I want to be a part of college football, but here we are. and it's not going anywhere. The cat's out of the bag, so got to learn to deal with it. Rob says, if an NIL deal is ruled as not above board, what will the penalty be to the team? I can't imagine a player is going to turn down money from a private party. So how I understand it is if a deal is determined to not be, as you put it, above board, it goes to arbitration. And how that happens, again, I fully expect the first athlete that is told their deal is invalid, quote unquote, to sue. I think that's where we'll end up pretty quickly. But how it's supposed to work is it's supposed to go to arbitration, and then they work out some sort of mediation there and come to a more appropriate dollar amount, I would assume. I don't think we ever get there. I think we immediately go to lawsuit. That's just kind of the world that has been college football from the past 3 to 4 years, and I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's more than likely. I don't see it playing out how they.
It sounds great.
Out.
Like,
sounds nice.
Yeah, when it's laid out in the house settlement, like, it sounds great. But again, until that first lawsuit drops, that's when it's all going to blow up, in my opinion. Which is unfortunate because I really want all those rules on NIL to stick because I think pay for play is ridiculous. I don't think a booster who has how many ever millions or billions of dollars should be able to just hand a kid money to go play for his school. I don't believe that. That's not the intention of NIL. That's not what NIL was ever supposed to be. But again, that's what NIL turned into because the NCAA basically got their legs cut out from underneath them because of antitrust laws. And you can't tell a kid how much blah, 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 right? So it's unfortunate, but I think it's going to be much of the same with the house settlement until players probably become employees and then unionize and then collectively bargain and set a parameters, much like the NFL does with their CBAs. We're going to continue to go down this road of lawsuit after lawsuit, in my opinion. John says some ACC schools are going to bump up men's basketball and maybe baseball distribution big time, much less percentage for football versus people like Clemson, FSU, and Miami. Jordan, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, you'll definitely see a lot more. I think basketball will definitely get the majority of the bump in terms of college baseball. I think there's some misconceptions about the money that's floating around right in that sport. It's really not as much as people think.
It's not a lot of money.
Yeah, like like in all the schools that you think are spending all this money on their roster, they're really not. But I do think one thing that I think has kind of gone under the radar in that sport, particularly with this house settlement, is that now that these players are going to get. I mean, these schools are getting 25 scholarships.
Right.
So, before it was the
versus 11,
the 11.7 that you had to divvy up, and and obviously you had way more players than you had scholars. So most kids were paying to go to school. So I think that's another thing that's been long overdue. That I think is a very, very big positive. Is you're seeing these baseball players that are actually able to get full rides now, and I think you'll see that see more of that, more so than guys just getting higher dollar figures in NIL money, because I really don't think that's the money that these kids are being paid in that sport is not what people seem to think it is. So, yeah, like I said, I do think that's a big positive.
All right, Joseph says BYOG or sell. Clemson going 11-1.
I feel like answering this. We're going to do our season predictions.
Yeah.
You know, do you want to?
We can wait.
We can wait. We're going to put that one off. We appreciate the question, Joseph, but
yeah,
it feels like giving away our schedule predictions. So we're gonna in this close, or we're getting this close to the season.
Rob's got some college baseball, Jordan. He said, "I hope the Beavs win in Omaha."
Yeah, I mean they're a fun story with everything that they've gone through. I mean, they had to play an independent schedule and all of that. People were very upset about their seeding, but they went and proved themselves, and then they went and and obviously taking down Florida State after they lost the first game. That was I think that was something very really really special. So they're definitely going to be a favorite in terms of like an underdog, so to speak. Hard to call them an underdog when they were a national seed, but a top 8 national seed at that. But I think a lot of people have been counting them out because of the schedule they played, and obviously they've proven to be a very good team, which shouldn't be surprising if you follow college baseball. Oregon State baseball has been very good for quite some time. So I do think that's something to consider. But I love the Coastal story. They have just continued to win. It's cool to see them go back to Omaha, even though it's obviously frustrating as a Clemson fan because you're obviously history-wise, Clemson has had much better history than Coastal Carolina, but they're the ones that have the College World Series, and you're the only one of the 3 major college baseball programs in the state that doesn't have a College World Series title, and that sucks a lot, and it's something that we get reminded of a lot. So, one day it'll change, but I do like Coastal's story, and if they won another one, it is what it is. I'd be happy for them. First year head coach too, so that'd be really cool.
John said there's already a Title IX based lawsuit filed against the settlement. Might be sooner than later for another theme suits for NIL. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me that there's already one out there. Let's see. We'll take a couple more and then we'll get out of here, Jordan.
All righty.
Trevor says, y'all go to bed. I just got home. We're about to.
We're about to.
We're wrapping it up. Okay, here we go. David says, if Clemson lands Atkinson, Lamar, Quinn, and Perry Wright, where would this class rank among Dabo's all-time classes?
Man,
that's a good question.
It would certainly be up there. I mean, when you consider like the completeness of the class, I mean, there's not like, because there legitimately you could say you had a high caliber player at every single position, really. And some classes you haven't been able to say that, and not for like reasons like you tried to get guys and you just didn't get them. But sometimes you didn't need a running back. Sometimes you didn't need a bunch of offensive linemen. So that happens. Right. But like this would be one of the more complete classes in Dabo's tenure. Even if like hell, even if it's not like a top 5. I mean, you only have 2 top 5 classes in history. But like even if it's not a top 5 class, when you look at the scope of positions that you would have covered, I mean, you have the quarterback, you would have the running back, you'd have a 5-star linebacker. You'd have multiple high caliber defensive linemen. You would have and he didn't even mention the safeties that like imagine if you land Joey O'Brien or a Blake Stewart to go along with the two 4-star safeties you already have in the class. That's something to consider. What if you land Danny Odom? So like, but I'll stick to the players he mentioned. It would still be very, very high up there when you consider the caliber of players that you have at multiple positions. Even if it's not like the top 5 classes like you did 2020, like that class. What was that? That was the Brian Brzee class, the Miles Murphy, Trenton Simpson, that group. But honestly, I would feel much better about this class than I did that one. And obviously that a lot of players, if you go back and look at that 2020 class, as good as it was on paper, a lot of those guys didn't pan out.
It didn't produce. Yeah. It didn't produce.
So
no doubt about that. All right. Couple more, and then we're out of here, Jordan. If you needed a reason to watch college baseball, Rob's got a tidbit for you here. He said Corvallis and Clemson are similar towns. Schools were founded the same year, and both have agriculture and military ties.
That is very true. They're the smaller school in terms of enrollment in their state. I think Oregon State is. I don't know Oregon State's like admission standards off the top of my head, but
yeah,
I think they're better than. I think they're more. I think they're more harsh than Oregon's are. So that's something to consider. You mentioned the military ties. I mean, like there's a lot, that goes into that. So, yeah.
All right, last two, and then we're out of here, Jordan. Do you think Clemson will make Vizina QB1 in 2026? By Joseph G.
I do.
I do as well.
I tend to think, if they're going to give him a shot until he proves he can't be the guy. And I personally am a believer in Chris Vizina, and I think the time he's been able to spend in the system, and just the fact that he's never really wanted to be anywhere else. I mean, that's very rare nowadays, and I do think that that's going to get rewarded, and I think he's a kid that's worked extremely hard. We just haven't seen a lot of him, so this season will be able to tell us a lot. If you can get him in games and see how he operates the offense, like that would that could be really exciting. Because he's gonna have some pieces to work with. The defense is certainly going to take its hits after this year, but offensively, you're still going to have some really, really talented pieces. You're going to have a young and talented running back room, the offensive line. While you're going to lose some guys, you're in the best shape talent wise at that position that you've been in a long time. Obviously, returning receivers like Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore. Maybe you get another year of Tyler Brown and Cole Turner. You think about those guys. Tight end. You're in a very good spot there. Third year Olsen Pat Henry. A second year or third year Christian Bentaker. Those guys. I should say fourth year Olsen Pat Henry, because this will be his third year. Right. So, Logan Brooking, who I'm very high on and excited to see how he develops down the line. I think he can be another Davis Allen type of player for you. So he'll have some weapons to work with. And I think the good thing is he'll have some competition too. With Chris Denton being in the second year, you bring in Tate Reynolds as a true freshman, like. You'll have some competition there. Brock Bradley will be in that class as well. So the room will be in good shape, I think. And I think Vizina will be in the driver's seat to be the starter in 26. So
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. Jordan, we got one more, and then we're going to get out of here. John Sarian says, are you guys planning on any guests during the summer?
yes, we are. Yes, we are.
We absolutely are. We're working on it as we speak. Hopefully, we will have several guests in the month of July heading into fall camp and ultimately the 2025 football season. So stay tuned for that. We got some guests coming up. I promise you. We're going to do it in the month of July, leading into fall camp. So appreciate you guys hanging out with us tonight. That's going to do it for the show. We got 28 people in the live chat. If you have not already, please hit that like button on your way out. Consider subscribing. Me and Jordan do the All In Show right here every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Follow us on Twitter. Jordan, first and foremost, Jobo0209. Great follow on Twitter. Tons of content over there that he posts. My Twitter handle is TPC _ CFB. I post far less than him, but I appreciate your follow as well. Check out the Voice of College Football official webpage. Check us out on Instagram. Check us out on X. And then also we are streaming on all audio streaming platforms. So Apple, Spotify, all of wherever you get your podcasts, go check us out. Search Clemson Live. And we are right there. Give us a rate, review, subscribe over there. Thank you guys so much for sticking out with us tonight. Sorry for the late start. And we'll see you next time right here, 9 p.m. next Wednesday. Until then, I'm Tiger Paul Craven. He's Jordan Bowman. Go Tigers.
Later, y'all.